We're going to spend some time talking about frictionless parking. And this is a presentation that's been prepared by the IPMI Technology Committee. The Technology Committee, as many of you know, is a group of folks within the industry that work on sharing information about various technology projects and items of interest to the IPMI community. This is probably, I think, our 12th presentation that we've done on various topics. And some of the other ones that we've done have been on curb management, micro-mobility, connected vehicles, parking guidance, data analytics. So we cover a lot. Why am I telling you about that? The Tech Committee is all about volunteers, and the more that people that we have participating, the better our materials are. So if you have an interest in participating in the Technology Committee, please come up and ask me. We'd love to get you involved. It's a great opportunity to meet your peers, talk about different new technologies coming out, and even get introductions to other technology firms within the parking industry as well as outside of the industry. I'm Mike Droe. I think I've had a chance to meet a lot of you, and if I haven't had a chance to meet you, please come up afterwards. I'd love to get to meet you and talk to you. So our agenda today, we're going to talk about frictionless parking. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the technology associated with frictionless parking, and then spend some time on use cases and next steps. It's a small group in here, and we're probably not going to, I don't want to do too much presentation. I want to start trying to create a dialogue and see where we're going to go. Typically it's about 40 minutes, but with a smaller group here, what I don't want to do is just keep you here to hear me drone on. So if we're not giving information that's of use, we'll skip over it. The topic has been really interesting. We started this in 2020, early 2020, right about the time the pandemic was starting. And a lot of the things that we're going to talk about were well underway regarding frictionless parking. What's been interesting is during the pandemic, many of those drivers that were creating activity towards frictionless parking have actually accelerated things. And we've seen even more adoption of various technologies that are enabling this kind of stuff. So let's start off. What exactly is frictionless parking? You can go into any vendor and they tell you they do frictionless parking. Then you have people calling it ticketless parking. You also have people calling it gateless parking, contactless parking. There are many, many names for it. And one of the things that we wanted to stress during this presentation is there is really no one version of frictionless parking. If someone tells you they're selling you a frictionless parking system, they're selling you their version of what that is. So what is the key about frictionless parking? It is bringing together operations and technology to support your customer needs. And that's the key. What may work for one university may not be acceptable or work in a different university. What works in an urban garage may not work at a university. So as we go through this, we're going to show you that there's a spectrum of solutions that can be brought to bear to deliver improved services. And I want to stress the importance of it's not buying technology. If you think you're just going to go buy a frictionless parking system or a contactless parking system or a gateless parking system, you're going to be sadly disappointed if you haven't thought about what are your customers' needs and what is your operating team's needs, because that is critical to make these solutions work effectively. So when we talk about frictionless parking system, and I'll just use that word as to cover all those other different names for it, it's really what are the goals that people are trying to accomplish with an improved system? Well, the first one is faster throughput. We're trying to move people faster through the facility. Well, why does that matter? Well, it depends. Maybe it's a recurring or employees that are here often, and they just want to get in and out. They don't want to waste time entering the garage, pulling a ticket, and knowing where they need to go. They want to get in and out quicker. Or maybe your garage is in a downtown environment where you have 300 people exit at the exact same time. Well, that would be another reason for faster throughput. And this is the key as we go through the objectives, is understanding what are you trying to accomplish with faster throughput and what customers are being impacted. Another significant goal is improving the customer convenience. Well, that makes sense, right? If I don't have to sit in a long line waiting to pay my parking ticket at a pay on foot, or even worse, in the lane as the cars are backing up in the garage, that's fantastic. That's an easy customer convenience. But frictionless parking also has a lot of benefit for other uses. Think about when you go to a hotel that has a parking garage attached to it. It's much easier if you can use your same key card to enter your room, to enter the garage. That's starting to add frictionless concepts into it. You're improving the customer convenience, your bills being put on your folio, things are getting simpler. Imagine that situation when the hotel then takes your license plate, and all you do is you drive up to the garage checks your license plates, knows you are staying at the hotel, up the gate goes. That's another example of even more customer convenience. So don't just think of customer convenience as, oh, they don't have to pay at a kiosk, or, oh, they don't have to pull a ticket. It's allowing us to connect our services that we provide in a parking environment to connect with other services that are being provided to various consumers. Always an important need is how to improve the revenue, right? Maybe you're not a for-profit business, but you're still trying to maximize the benefits and value derived from your system, whether it's an economic dollars or customer service, etc. So obviously improving revenue, if people are going to pay and it makes it easier for them to pay, they'll probably be more willing to pay. That's accurate. But there's other benefits that derive from a frictionless system. Because of how the systems are established, you're going to have better connection with that consumer. You're probably going to need to know who that consumer is. You're going to then have history about how often they park there, where are they coming from. With that information and with a relevant marketing program, you're going to be able to start developing special pricing programs for people. You're going to start to identify different customers and their needs, which you're going to be able to price for. Why does that matter? Well, in some cases, people will pay more if they're in a certain type of need. Think about on an airplane. We all get on the same metal tube, right? We all go from the same airport or origin to the same destination. But very few of us have paid for that same airplane fare. We all had different needs. Some of us bought at the last minute, some of us bought months ahead of time, some of us want to be at the front of the plane, some of us want to be over the wing, all sorts of different combinations. For many years in parking, we've always said, oh, a parking space is $5, regardless of your need and desires and what you wanted to do. With this additional information and through all the tools that we're going to talk about, you're going to be able to start offering different pricing to different people to generate that revenue or receive that value that you're issuing to those entities. And then finally, the reduced on-site support. The goal is not to get rid of our folks out of a garage, but it is recognizing, especially in today's times, how hard it is to find labor to do work. So by using some of these techniques and tools, you're going to be able to redeploy your people to other needs, have them work on other stuff while you're still maintaining the customer. So as we go through different scenarios, I encourage you to think about your operations. If you're trying to migrate to these, what are your goals or what are your objectives in each of these goals? It's going to help you define the technology you want. So it's interesting, right? It always seems like a new concept just pops up and everyone wants to do it. But if you actually think about it, most things that seem like they just popped up have actually been in progress for many years. And so how did we get to this idea of frictionless parking? Well, it's actually started many, many years ago. How many here actually go to a bank anymore? Oh, one. There you go. I wasn't expecting any, but we'll take it. But our use of our phones, ATMs, most of us can now process a check through our phone, take a picture and send it in. We're becoming more accustomed to digital and self-service needs. Think about at a retail store. How many of us are now checking out ourselves at the Target or the Walmart? And we're going to talk about it a little bit later. Amazon now has it where it's so frictionless, you just take the stuff off the shelf and walk out. They have technology that's tracking you and watching you, and they know what to charge your account based on what you've taken off the shelf. So we're seeing that same thing. We're getting used to it in our daily lives. The technology is also catching up. We've got pay-on-foot machines and pay kiosks that are getting lower cost and more efficient at what they do. The LPR systems are becoming more reliable in how they're evaluating license plates and giving us a higher level of confidence that they're looking at the right things. The mobile payment tools are all getting better, and they're much more ubiquitous. Everyone has a mobile payment tool now, right? Every technology provider does. Google's sending stuff out. The car manufacturers want in on payments. Everyone wants to be in payments, and so we have many more options. And then finally, the ability to integrate data is critical to this. We're finally seeing data coming together to allow multiple different services to enable these services to be delivered. So all of that is kind of laying the foundation for us to accelerate the use of technology and integrate it into our operations. And as I talked about earlier, right, none of this stuff just happens. And we can go back to contactless systems for many years ago. Think about toll payments. We've been using toll roads for 20 plus years, RFID. You know, it used to be you'd stop, put your coin in, and now you just drive through. We're seeing it at airports as well, especially for ground transportation systems with limousines, hotel shuttles, etc. They used to have to buy passes and come through and drop off at each at a booth that, hey, I'm allowed to come on here to pick up my hotel passengers. Not anymore. They can just drive through with RFID tags and LPR systems that are being tracked, and then the airport bills those services for those. Event parking. How many of us now expect to be able to prepay for our parking, get our directions to go to the specific lot that we need to go to for an event, rather than driving to the event and trying to figure out where to go? Again, all of these things are allowing us on an individual basis to become more accustomed to the idea of frictionless parking. And it's critical because, as I've said, it's not just the technology, it's the operations and integrating it into our operations that enable us to be successful with this. And these are the early adopters that are helping us learn how to integrate it into our operations. So we've talked about the early adopters. We're going to spend some time here in a minute talking about the enabling technologies that will enable a frictionless ecosystem. And as you can see, there are several here that we're going to spend some time on, and we'll go through those in a minute. And the key, though, I want to stress is there's not a single technology that causes you to be frictionless. It's a spectrum. It's understanding what are your operating needs, what are you trying to accomplish, and then bringing to bear the correct technologies to enable your operation to be successful. And as we go through it, and we kind of just talked about that spectrum here, and it's critical, don't just focus on the consumer. We're going to also spend time understanding frictionless parking has an impact on your operating teams. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So as we think about frictionless, we can talk about it in an on-street environment and in an off-street environment. In an on-street environment, we've actually kind of been pretty close to frictionless for a good 5 to 10 years now. Mobile payment tools are allowing us to enable payments to happen, reducing the need for how you do enforcement and how you track it has improved. Probably the friction points in on-street parking now are still the enforcement side. You have to issue a paper citation, or are there simpler ways to alert someone that they made a violation and make them pay? But what's interesting, it's growing just beyond parking. We all have, if you're in a city, the pressure that you have on your curbs from FedEx, from UPS, from Amazon delivery, from the different food delivery services, from food trucks. Everyone is fighting for that curb space. So as we think about frictionless, how are you going to make it easier for all of those services to access your curb? How can a FedEx get a permit to do deliveries in a certain area? And how are you going to make that easier? Those are the things that we have the ability to think about now, again, to improve throughput, generate revenue, and improve that customer convenience. Off-street is probably where you see a lot of people talking about this right now, right? There's a lot of opportunity to do things. The operations are a little different here. The activity is different. It's a lot more transient. and the infrastructure to support it is going to be different. I have entry lanes and exit lanes where I can put different technologies. So again, and we're going to talk through some of the different technologies there to support that. And this goes to probably the big highlight of the presentation. It's the spectrum. There is no right or wrong on this spectrum. It's all dependent on what your operational needs are. And your garage may have different cases of how you're using it for different use cases. So on the far left, higher friction, it may have a lower upfront cost, right? You may have someone go to an honor box to put their dollar in, right? A lot of friction there. But on the operational side, there's not as much friction. I don't have to have an attendant there. I have other benefits from there. On the far right side, 100% frictionless. A customer just drives onto the lot. They don't talk to anyone. They park the car. They walk away. The operator knows who's there, how much to charge them, has the ability to charge them, and everyone's good, right? That's kind of utopian. Those aren't completely out there yet. And on the far left, we have moved away from that from the 1970s already. We recognize the limitations. So this is something that we'll think about when you're evaluating it. And it's critical to remember, there's no right place to be on here to be frictionless. It really depends on your operation. So kind of talking about what does that look like? Well, in today's world, you may have a parking location that's ungated with just a payment kiosk and mobile payment, and that you're doing transactions with cash and credit card transactions done by hand. The person's going up and putting it in to the device. You may have other places where there's a little bit more minimal touch points to initiate or end that parking session. And that's going to be a key thing when we start talking about the technology of what you're trying to do, where it's not just the payments. It's how does someone activate their parking session that says, yes, I want to park, and yes, I'm done parking. We need to think about that as we develop our operations. And then finally, there's the completely frictionless. No need to initiate or end the parking. That's that example of I'm walking in, or I'm going to the garage, I'm parking and I'm leaving. I'm not touching anything. I'm not telling anyone I'm here. I'm not paying for it in a way here. It's all being done automatic. It's a lot like that Amazon example that I was giving you earlier, where you walk into the store, you grab the bread, you grab the peanut butter, and you walk out the store. No one bothers you, no one says anything, and then on your Amazon bill, you've got a $4.73 charge because you took some bread and you took some peanut butter. That's what we'll need to think about. But as I said before, remember, it's not, your garage may have multiple different levels. You may have your contract parkers. Let's say you're running an office building or a university with student faculty. You may be over here. Your students and faculty come online, they buy their daily permits, they know where to park, everything's good, it's automatically paid for. That may be over here. But then you also have guests that are coming up and they're not sure where to go to. Well, you may decide that needs to be over here because the guests aren't there all the time. Who wants to spend 10 minutes setting up an account to park for 2 hours? No one does. That's not an effective use of their time or an effective use for the operation. It's too much overhead to do the account management. So that's when we need to think about that. So as you evaluate your garage, it's critical to think through those different user groups and recognize they may be on different levels of this spectrum. So we're going to stop there. A lot of information before we jump into the technologies. What are people's thoughts, questions? You guys all ready to do the Watkins Glen hike?
I have a thought.
Yeah.
I work at the University of Buffalo, and we have a one-paid parking lot with a gate. And I would love to be frictionless because it would be so easy for our annual card holders that just pull in, go right through. It's very easy, right? Then you think about the emission that also use the parking lot. It'd be great for that. They can plug in a lot of their parking, their license plate ahead of time. They can pull right through as well for a code for that day. But then you get the folks who require a little bit of attention. They need directions to go here and there. So while it's a very attractive option, great for our annual users, our daily users, very tough to get away with no human being there to help guide those people to the actual building they're going to, or if someone arrived there by mistake, wrong place for the wrong thing. So trying to find the balance like you illustrated here is tremendous out there.
And that is exactly, and I think, you know, the way you're thinking about it, identifying your various customer groups allows you to identify, okay, where can we be on this spectrum that meets their needs? And then typically you are going to find a group that doesn't quite fit this goal of this pure frictionless, and it's how are you going to do it? And then once you identify that group, you'll be able to start working on solutions for them. You know, is there an information kiosk that you implement that they can go up to, much like you see in a mall? There are different ways to help them and work through that problem. And you may find out, no, we just need to have someone there able to help them at all times. Yeah, that is the exact point of the discussion here, because being from a technology provider, we always want to say, oh, our technology can solve it, our technology can solve it, but it's critical to understand the operations and what you're trying to accomplish. So thank you for sharing that. Other comments, thoughts? So, and this kind of was it was kind of a good lead-in. This is an example that we've used to kind of help people understand, so where are the friction points? So this is a typical garage that is trying to do frictionless, right? The vehicle enters the facility, and typically in a version of a frictionless garage, that vehicle is going to be recorded as entering via a credential. That credential may be, I pulled the ticket from the ticket spitter. It may be the LPR system read my plate, and now I have a record of them entering the garage. It may be a cashier handed a pass to them to enter. Those are all ways that were recorded. And you can see just in that description how variable that friction point can be. Right? Some of them I just allowed me to drive in with no problem. Other ones I had to stop and engage with someone. The next major friction point happens with how they pay. If I'm online going to an event and I'm prepaying for that event, that friction still happens. That friction just point happens out here. The question then becomes, how hard is it to figure out where I want to park? How many of us have gone onto a website trying to buy parking and have become frustrated because after 10 minutes you can't figure out where you want to park and what the price is? I know that's happened to me a couple times. Right? That's a friction point that sometimes, oh, we're frictionless. Look, we're online, we're mobile. But it's really creating friction for the consumer because they can't figure out where they want to go. We need to think about that. And those are two big friction points. Well, then that transaction, and let's continue on the process. The person's in, it's LPR. We are tracking where they are now. Now we're making sure that all the people that have entered the garage have paid. Good. Was it easy to do? How many times do we have an enforcement officer that has their phone and they are looking up the One Payment Services website to say, oh, okay, here are the people that are allowed to park. Then I go to the next service, yep, okay, and I got that list. They've got 4 lists that they have to manage, right? Customer side is frictionless, but our operational side is not so frictionless anymore. And when that happens, when we're creating friction for our own internal operations, that's when things start to slip, mistakes get made, and openings happening in the audit. So we need to think about that. Then enforcement notices go out. Here's the next thing. What about overstays and overpayments? How are you, or underpayments? How are we tracking that? And is there a frictionless way or less frictionless way to enable customers to know that they are overstaying? Some of them are deliberately doing it, right? If they don't think anyone's watching and they can get away with it, they're going to do with it. And then the final point is the vehicle leaves, the transaction closes. This is a big opening in a lot of the frictionless systems today. We've collected payment and everyone's happy, but we don't know when they actually left, and we've never actually closed out the transaction. Someone paid us $5, but should they have paid us 10? Should they have paid us 12? In a garage and gated system, we always had that open, close, here's the expected revenue, did the revenue happen? I would argue, even in a frictionless environment, as we talk about open payments and other options, that same methodology should still apply. You should know when the vehicle entered, you should know when the vehicle exited, and did you collect the right payments? And again, this goes back to the back end side of how frictionless is this operation for your own operating team? Is the technology actually enabling the operations to be effective? Any comments on that? Any examples that people have had just where you put in new technology and the workload for your teams increased substantially?
Just about a comment about payment. I mean, to me, frictionless on the spectrum means you have to enforce it. So you have to roll through your garage and kind of bang people that happen.
That's a great point, Jim, because I think so many people like, oh, we got the money, we're good. If you didn't hear Jim, his comment was a key part of any system, frictionless system, is ensuring that the enforcement is happening. And I agree. That goes to this backside over here. Frictionless is not just taking the payment. It's making sure that you know that everyone's following the rules and doing the right things and that you've collected the revenue for it. And that's a key part in a lot of the frictionless systems that people are selling and talking about. We aren't thinking about the enforcement side. So are we really selling a complete solution yet? Probably not. Good steps towards it, but that's a great point, Jim, that operations need to think about that.
The other thing that I always think, if you have a kind of a mixed-use garage where you've got monthly card holders, daily, you need kind of gates to regulate. Not maybe at a point where there's an event in town and you can't let in everybody because you have to hold X amount of spaces for permanently.
Save that thought on gates because we are going to talk about them. That is another, I would say, big myth about frictionless systems. The word, I don't like the word gateless because I think that is promoting an idea that is false, and I think some people are misinterpreting what it means. So this kind of hits on then, what's a presentation even in 2021 without talking about COVID, right? We're going to talk about it for a long time. But what was interesting for us was how many things that we saw before the pandemic started that were just reinforced in this frictionless world by these things. So you have more people working from home or doing hybrids. So we're seeing universities changing from buying semester permits to I just need to buy a permit for the days I'm going to class. How do I enable that? And allowing people to go in and out. There was the demand management. How do I handle then all those different groups trying to come and go? I've got these hybrid workers now. Well, maybe I don't need 700 spaces. I can get down to 350. True, as long as everyone doesn't come on Wednesday. I don't know about your office. My office, Monday's empty, Friday's empty. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are the busy days in the office, right? So are we really saving any space if people are just taking off the last two? No, we got to figure out how to spread people across those dates to really get rid of that unnecessary capacity. The higher parking rates, we are seeing, in many cities that when they are turning on their parking, they're trying to figure out how to replenish their budgets. It is a challenge. So we're seeing parking rates go up. So that means coin activity is going down. Bill activity is going down. We're becoming more accustomed to just paying with our credit card or with accounts that are open. So a lot of these things are helping us push forward on these technologies and increasing the adoption and the acceptance by our customers. So we'll spend a little time talking about the different technologies that are supporting these different frictionless solutions. And I want to stress again, there is no one right, perfect solution. It's a matter of taking a look at your customers and then bringing to bear those technologies that are our best fit. So barcode, QR code, and Bluetooth-based systems, they do a lot of great things. They provide you details about who's in the garage and who's not. For each customer, it gives you a specific identification. And typically, you have more information than you did get from someone pulling a ticket because a person typically has to register to get a barcode or a QR code. You know who they are, you know the type of car they're driving, and you may even know what their purpose is. In a hospital, you know it's a doctor's visit. On a university campus, it's a prospective student and family coming to visit, or it's a faculty member coming, or it's an on-site conference that's going on. So you get to know a lot more about what that person is. The cons with some of these systems, though, you probably need a smartphone to work. How many of you have ever been in an underground garage or a garage made of a significant amount of concrete and have tried to use your phone? Yeah, very limited availability. So this is where great technology, but you need to think about your structure and where you are to make sure that it's going to work the way you want. Bluetooth, another very cool technology that I think is going to grow and expand. One of the challenges of Bluetooth today, people go, oh, that's great, right? It's going to be frictionless. It's going to be easy. I'm going to pull out my phone and away it goes. The challenge with a Bluetooth device is when you pull into a lane, typically the car doesn't know, is it the driver's phone, is it the passenger's phone, or is it the car next door's phone? So if you notice, most Bluetooth devices say, oh, can you just confirm that you're the right person? So it loses a little bit of the frictionless capability because of that. And what becomes a little worse is if cars are behind it and the person doesn't know that they should be interacting with their phone and fumbling through that. Now you've just created more friction for other people. So it's a great technology. I think we're going to have to see how it evolves and grows to adapt to these new operating cases. Now, on the other hand, if you only have a single lane and your customers are repeat customers and they know what to do, it may be the perfect solution for what you're trying to do. So again, just another example of thinking about the technology. Don't just go buy it because you're like, ooh, that's cool. Think about how it fits into your operations. Any other challenges that people have seen or experienced with kind of the mobile, the QRs, Bluetooth, anything?
Yeah, the QR can be, I remember when we launched a Pay-by-Cell in Montgomery County, Maryland, when it got dark, the flash would go on for like ever, and you couldn't necessarily do it, so you had to do it within the app in order to initiate it.
No, that's actually, I've never heard that, and that's a great example, and it makes a lot of sense. If you don't have good lighting on the QR codes, it's going to be hard for people to use. That's a great point.
Story on your garage. I left the NEPC conference in August, and parking was in an underground garage, so trying to get directions out of the garage. So I'm trying to program it while I'm in the garage, but it's not working. So as soon as I get out of the garage, it then reconnects. But at that point, yes, there's cars behind me. I'm in traffic. So it took me an extra like 20 minutes to get out of Boston because I got lost. Because I wasn't able to connect it. My GPS coordinated. By the time I got to the surface level, yeah, it starts to talk to you. But I'm already engaged.
Yep.
I'm in a city. It's not like I can just pull over somewhere, curb space, right? We talked about there's no curb available. Just
Yeah, you can't just do that to get reoriented. Another great example. So this is why it's so critical. Think about your customers, and then think about the operations you're trying to support to bring in that technology. Great examples. Mobile payment-based systems. Again, great tools. A lot of use of them, and there's a lot more of them out there now. Everyone has a tool, and everyone is trying to sell it. So the question is going to be, well, how many are appropriate? Is it better just to have a single one and allow customers to really adopt it and learn it and use it? Or is it much more like when you go to the store and you have, are you Visa, are you MasterCard, are you American Express, are you Discover? Is it better to let customers have choice? Those are the kind of the conversations you'll need. And it's going to depend on your customer base. If you have a lot of recurring customers, you can probably go to a single system. If you're in a large city that has a lot of people that come and go, they're going to want to have the options that they know how to use. They're not necessarily going to want to create new accounts. Then you get into, are they mobile-based or text-based? Or how do guest people access it? All great discussions. And the good news is everyone's working towards solutions to support those different cases. And then the final big one is around customer data ownership. It's who owns these customers. As we all know, Facebook, Google, these are billion, maybe even trillion-dollar companies. What are their value? It's the data they have. And we protect our parking spaces, we protect our parking garages, we coat them, we paint them, we clean them, we treat those assets beautifully because we understand the tangible value. How many of you are thinking about the value of the customer data that you have? And not just because you can use it to generate more money, but because you have a responsibility to protect that data for use. So as we think about mobile payment systems, thinking about what you're doing with the customer data, how you're protecting that customer data is pretty important as well, especially as you think about the tools that you're rolling out. Payment and occupancy detection. This is an interesting thing, and this kind of goes to that idea of creating more revenue. When we get on an airplane, we know there are some people who pay a lot more money or fly a lot more times per year to have the benefit to sit in the first 4 rows, right? People value that. Same thing is happening in parking garages. I can tell you when I was with an operator, you could tell, and I'm sure every one of you know, in your parking facilities, what are the prime spaces that everyone wants to get to? Maybe it's by an elevator, maybe it's by an exit door. There's something about a space that has intrinsic value that everyone wants. Well, when we start thinking about occupancy detection systems, we can now start generating value from that. Think about putting up the sign because someone made a reservation on a mobile provider, and now it says, Mr. Dro, here's your space, and it's waiting for you with a digital sign. And for that right, I paid an extra $1 to know. I think this goes back to Jim's point. How are you enforcing that, though, to make sure that that value is received? So again, great ideas, extra costs, though, to put in those sort of detection systems. One that's been around for a long time, and actually I'm going to ask Jim to maybe give an update on EZPass if you know. The last time I worked with EZPass was probably 7-8 years ago, and at the time they were trying to promote the EZTag as a payment method, but that there was a pretty hefty processing fee to use EZPass to access their toll tag and to process a payment. I want to say it was upwards of 20%. I don't know if that's still the case or if they're still doing that or not, but I know it created challenges. Jim, do you have any?
You mean related to EZPass being used in parking locations?
Yeah.
Yeah, years ago, I know at Newark Airport, it was a payment method. So instead, you could either pay via credit card or whatever, or you could charge your EZPass account. But it didn't open the gate when you flew in.
It was just a payment method. All right.
Since then, I don't know.
Right.
I've lost touch of it.
Yeah, I actually just downloaded EZPass, like the app, and I got the thing with my truck and everything. And I think the fee to start it was like $25. And then once the threshold got down to like you could set it whatever you wanted to be like $10, then they'll automatically take that payment from the credit card.
Yeah, and that's right on the tag. This was the example of when I go to the airport and I pay. When I was last working with them, EZPass was saying, airport, you're going to pay us X percent. And again, in a private garages, they were saying, you're going to pay a 20% fee to us to allow us to process that payment for you, much like Jim's was talking about. So that was, I'm going to point to Heather because I saw you nodding your head a second ago.
Yeah.
Any knowledge on this?
We did something, we tried something similar, and it was a
challenge. So.
Yeah, and that was like a year and a half ago, and it was, I think it was 25% they wanted.
Yeah.
So,
They've gotten really restrictive on who they partner with too.
yes.
Yeah, it's like a whole consortium, it was very cumbersome. So I used to work in New Jersey Transit and ran on commuter parking. The idea was to allow EZPass to pay for commuter parking, but it was so complicated and working with the Port Authority that owned, it was like.
Done with it. We're moving on. And that was kind of the challenge. So that'll be interesting to see how these toll authorities view themselves. And probably 10 years ago, they were sitting in a golden spot to control stuff. I can tell you right now, there are a lot of government entities that recognize the value of having a payment solution associated to a vehicle. And so they're working on, should there be a national transponder RFID account that the U.S. government can manage and offer and give out, and in their world, to enable these payments. So we'll see what happens with that, but it's just another example of great opportunities, right? Because we all are used to driving on a toll road, and I know airports are doing it now as well in limited cases. So imagine having that taken out to going to a garage, or my goodness, even going to the McDonald's, ordering your hamburgers and having the toll tag go. So we'll see. We all are very familiar with LPR-based systems, and this is one where the technology is just accelerating so quickly. 5-10 years ago, you had to buy very dedicated systems with special cameras and special processing units and everything else. Now we're getting to the point where the software is so good, you can use almost any type of camera, but it really goes to the software and what's being done to manage it. And that helped improve things from the 80% read rate into the low 90s. Now we see a lot of the higher end technology firms that are doing LPR systems embedding artificial intelligence and machine learning. They are taking the reads from your garage and they're learning and making their reads better. I'm now seeing data that's saying once the AI systems are implemented, they're getting up to 97, 98% accuracy on their read rates. That's phenomenal. You may say, oh, but it's not 100%, so it's not good. In garage operations, unless it's changed in the last 5 years, I'm pretty sure a 2 to 3% lost ticket is considered a good day. So that kind of shows how critical, does LPR need to be 100%? Yes, we would all love it. But at what level does it really need to be 100%? What is a workable number that can fit into our operations? So LPR is a great tool. There's also another benefit to LPR. Because it's video-based, I'm not just reading the license plate. A lot of the newer systems have gone from OCR, so optical character recognition. I'm not just looking for letters. They're looking at the object. And they're also reading the license plate, but they're doing object detection, and they're creating a fingerprint of the car. So this car that just entered was blue, had a dent on the backside, has a bumper sticker on the rear bumper, and we're going to identify that as the car, and we're going to look for that same thing to leave because we didn't quite get a good license plate read. So that is also helping us to improve an identification of a vehicle, because in the end, that's what we're trying to do when we're doing a transaction. Any experiences with kind of some of the more advanced uses of the LPR into that object detection? Anyone had it? Okay. I'd be glad to talk about it. I've seen it in use. It's pretty neat when they're doing that and able to identify that fingerprint of the vehicle.
Someone, I think it was Raycord, did a demo of it for me, and they were showing how 6 lanes at a time, you could, exactly what you're just talking about. It was a Toyota, it had the dent in the front thing, it has 2 passengers in the car. I mean, it is really getting sophisticated.
Yeah. So
no more of that worrying about what you're reading on the license plate.
Right. That is just like almost icing on the cake when you get the license plate number, because that can help you with enforcement and other identification needs. Yeah. And that's where I was going to next. The value of a license plate-based system is that video stream has multiple other uses for multiple other groups. Security, you can use it for occupancy, for vehicle counting. There are many other uses. So that $1,200 camera now just had 5 more uses to it. And if you go find those other entities that need the help, you're now starting to fund it. So you're getting a lot more value out of the LPR.
Just one thing to consider is the read length. Because as we design garages, they need a pretty long read time.
Thank you for that, Jim. I forgot to mention that because that is the first bullet point that I kind of skipped over. I mean, you can't put it anywhere. You can't have a 6-inch read and expect to do anything. It requires a little bit of analysis to make sure your facility is going to work. Does it have the right lighting conditions? Where does the sun come up? I've seen some people that have an east or west facing garage and they're like, this thing doesn't work in the morning. Well, that's because the sun is directly into the lens for about 2 hours a day. So things that need to be thought through. Thanks, Jim. And this will be an interesting one, is the connected car. We all know our cars are becoming smarter and smarter and are always connected. It was interesting and maybe a little scary. About 10 years ago, I had the ability to go to GM and have some talks with some of their technology folks. It was GM. And as you all know, they have OnStar, right? And you think, oh, I'm not going to buy that subscription. Well, whether you bought this subscription or not, they knew what was happening with every vehicle that they had out there that was connected to OnStar. They've gotten to the point where they said, we know what our customers' trips are because we see them. We know that 20-year-olds do this. We know that 50-year-olds do this. You go, we don't even really ask for surveys anymore because what they found was what people were telling them and what they were actually doing weren't the same thing. So these connected cars are telling a lot of information. They're providing a lot of data to whoever needs them. Interestingly, GM was of the view that they're always going to continue to sell cars, but how we buy them is going to change. They're basically thinking, we're going to buy a membership to have access to vehicles. So we're not going to necessarily own a car. We're going to have a membership in a platform that gives us access to 30 cars in a fleet that is near us. So they're very interested in connecting the car and becoming part of your transportation life. They want to understand where you're buying, understand where you're going. And so we're going to see the connected car, I think over the next 5 to 10 years, play a bigger role. And the automotive manufacturers are going to play a bigger role in how these payments and things work. So we'll need to look for that and think through that as well. And now, the point that Jim had brought up earlier about gates. So a key thing that we want everyone to remember, gates are not bad. There will always be reasons for gates. The one that probably is most important to me is how many times have you seen a gateless facility, how fast do people exit that garage, right? A gate helps slow people down. So now imagine there's a sidewalk and there's a school right next to this garage and the students like to walk in front of that garage. A key value of a gate is it helps create a little bit of separation and slow people down so you don't run someone over on a sidewalk. So gates are not bad. It can still be a frictionless environment, but we just want to slow someone down. Gates could be used because you need security, right? There are a lot of facilities that we manage and operate where we need to keep people out, or we need to keep the car in because we don't want unauthorized people to leave it. So we encourage people not to think of frictionless as gateless. You can have a very frictionless environment, but you still may need gates. So don't push on that idea that I have to get rid of my gates. You may have the opportunity to do so, and we encourage it, but don't think that that's the end-all, be-all. And I don't know, Jim, if you have anything else to add to that.
No, I think it's a great point about the monitoring traffic too. We can put the garage, actually people, it was a commuter garage, people drive like 30 miles an hour into it. So it's like somebody's gonna get killed there, but the gate stops them.
Yeah, I have a garage in Biddeford, Maine, and we've had people come, brand new garage, come from around the country to race in it. Like Fast Five, legit. Coming up on our roof, they come flying in, groups of them from like Washington and all over the country. They literally have this whole Instagram and following, and they come, they can't hit our garage. And we don't have a gate there.
So a great point of thinking through what level of frictionless operation you want, but start with your operation, start with your customer, think about the environment and what are the needs. And again, you can have a gate there that automatically goes up. You just want people to slow down a little bit rather than stop to pay. So that the use of the gate has changed. As we've talked, it's a spectrum. Think about what your needs are and then build the technology and integrate it into your operations. Don't just buy technology and implement it. I guarantee you, you will have less satisfactory results when you just buy technology and don't think about what your operations are and what your needs are. And that final one, consider the customer and consider the property needs. Who are you working with? What are your customers expecting? If you're going to implement a mobile payment, which I encourage, do it. But are the customers going to want to create accounts, or do you have a lot of transient people who are guests that may only show up once at a time? Think about how much time you require to create an account. So now we're going to get into use cases. And I know we're kind of getting along, so what I was going to try to do, we're going to go through these a lot faster. Before we get into them, any other general thoughts on the technology or the use cases? No? Okay, so these use cases are just talking about a lot of the things that we've highlighted before. So in a higher education, what are some of the operating objectives? Well, a positive first and last impression. You want you're a high place of higher learning. You want to look like you have some clean operations and you know what's going on. Demand management. Where am I putting the students? Where am I putting the faculty? How am I balancing that? What are the heavy school days? Is it 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock on Wednesday? We have 20,000 students on site, but on Friday afternoon there's 10. How do we balance that out? Payments. Am I using a mobile payment tool? Am I using my student cards, the blackboards and the Seaboard, the various banners, those different kind of payment programs? And how do you want to communicate to these different groups? Is that a need or is it not a need? So those are typically some of the objectives. A situation that we see a lot with our clients in the universities is LPR Solutions for student, staff, and faculty. We're seeing more use of virtual permits. People going online based on your classification in the university. Are you a freshman, a sophomore, a graduate student? What school are you in? Where are you taking your classes? That's giving you priority to park in different areas. Are you a faculty, administration, a support person? That defines where you're going to be able to park and where you go. And what they're doing then is through the LPR, they're able to track, okay, we saw this specific car enter at the right time and we know what to do. And if we see, going to Jim's point about enforcement, if they see an inappropriate car in a lot at a certain time, they issue kind of a notice onto the account that says, okay, you didn't follow the rules. This time it's a warning. Next time it's a $20 fee. And you're like, oh, well, how do you get them to pay? Well, you don't give them their diploma or you don't give them their paycheck. So the universities have thought through this and are starting to use some of these things to improve that. They also like it because it allows them to communicate to the impacted people when there's an issue. Let's say a surface lot has to redo the electrical wiring and they're tearing up the lot. They know, here are the customers we need to talk to today to let them know you need to go park in lot 7 tomorrow. We've talked through a lot of the pros and cons of these. If you're using a mixed facility like the gentleman that I think he left already was doing, you have non-paying, oh, I'm sorry, there you are, non-paying customers. How do you deal with those? That is the challenge in some of these LPR only. You need to either put a payment kiosk there, you need to have a mobile payment solution there, and you need to provide enough signage so that people know how to use it. Event parking. A great tool. I mean, this is one that I think has been very widespread. Whether you go to a baseball game, I even go to my son's youth sports now, and we have the ability to pay for parking in advance and just show a student as we're driving in what's going on. I think this is pretty prevalent now. The idea is with LPR is being able to put a mobile LPR camera out there to speed up the process. So now you don't need 20 agents. If people have prepaid, just watch them, tell them to come through a special lane. The people that still have to do cash, bring them through a different lane. If that LPR system will tell you, hey, we just saw someone that didn't pay, and through that LPR system, you can kind of figure out where they are and go deal with it. Airports. We'll go through this one very quickly. From a customer side, it's very simple, right? We're seeing a lot more prepaid reservation. What was being done in off airports is now being done in a lot of on-airport parking situations as well. People are prepaying for their parking because they want a special area in the garage, or they're using the valet so they can reclaim their space ahead of time. At O'Hare Airport, I was part of an experiment there where, if you're familiar with O'Hare Airport, the garage is about 25,000 spaces, has about 5 levels of it, I remember. Level 3, though, there were 2 walkways, one to the United ticket, and on the other side was the American ticket. And everyone wanted on level 3, and everyone wanted to either be on the, I think it was the east side or the west side. There was about 500 spaces that would always get crowded out. O'Hare Airport said, let's charge $50 a day to park there rather than $30 a day. It sold out all the time, and it was a reservation thing. And because people wanted that convenience to get on that walkway, to get to United or to get to American. So we're seeing some of that use come in here. The challenge was, how do you enforce it and how do you move it? It created extra work for our operating teams because they basically, when a car parked there illegally, they basically had to go over there, put a dolly under it, and move the car somewhere else and then give it a ticket. So some good and bads on there. We've talked about the LPR, and we've talked about registered parker solutions, allowing people who park a lot to have the convenience of going to a special lot, just drive in and drive out and not have to worry about a ticket. Just get an email with what the payments are and send it to if they're business travelers, to their expense reporting system. We've talked about the toll tag already as well. Municipalities. This is probably the biggest area for a lot of this stuff to happen just because of the different uses that are happening on the curb. You know, again, we talked about 10 years ago, it was parking. But now we're trying to deal with deliveries and Ubers and all the other services that are trying to access that same space. So how are we going to make it easy for those businesses to find out what they're allowed to do, how to get a permit, and then how to pay for it? And then on the backside, how do we enable the enforcement to happen? You know, is it going to be where FedEx, they register their vehicles through a city system, and then as the vehicles pull into these delivery zones, the camera will watch it, will scan it and say, okay, FedEx, you used 10,500 minutes of delivery time this month. You had a contract for up to 11,000. Here's your fee structure. You pay us, you know, $250,000 for that use this year. That may be a way to do it. It creates friction, or it creates less friction for everyone, and it improves actually if you think about all the administrative stuff. Right now, FedEx has to work through all of these tickets that they're getting, right? It's not the most effective way. They're not stopping their people from getting tickets. They don't care that their people get tickets. They care that the packages get delivered. So we're creating friction by having all these ticketing and all these transactions. Let's create a way where we say, FedEx, here's where we want you to work and how we want you to do your deliveries, and here's what you're going to pay for it. That's how we create less friction in the systems for all of our people. And then the final one on an on-street is the equity of payment types. Recognizing not everyone has accessibility to credit cards or a smartphone that can work. So how do we make sure that everyone has an equal chance to pay for the services and have access to those services? So that's the other thing that needs to go into the municipal operations. Hospital, we've kind of talked about, is very similar to universities. It's separating staff. We need to make sure that a guest can get into a garage quickly and easily. They have thousands of other concerns on their head when they're racing to take a family member or a friend to the hospital. How do we make that easy? Similarly, how do we make sure that the staff, how do we make sure the doctors and the staff know where to park and they're not taking up those spaces? This is a great example of where the technology is being used in a frictionless way to track where are people parking. Nurses and administrative staff, you should be parking up on levels 4 and 5. Leave the guests and the patients down low. Doctors are probably down low as well, typically. But we're going to have the administrative staff up high. We're going to use cameras and different technology to make sure the employees are following the rules. If you follow the rules, you park for $2. If you don't follow the rules and we find you, we're going to notify your supervisor, and it's probably going to go on your annual job report and evaluations. And then event parking, we've already spent some time talking about. So to summarize the meeting or this discussion, when we think about frictionless, remember, start with what your customers' needs are, what are your operating needs, and then go figure out the technology. Also, as the point that was brought out before, remember, you may have different levels of frictionless for each different customer group in the same garage. That is okay. Because you want to be frictionless doesn't mean everyone in the garage needs to be frictionless. Maybe you can take care of 80% of those customers, which accomplishes a lot of your goals, but you still need to take care of that other 10%, which may be have a little bit more friction in it. That's okay. Just understand what you're doing and think then through what are the different cases, how to improve the experience for them. These are the next steps, and we kind of already touched on them. Understand your needs, understand your operation, understand your environment, define what you're trying to develop the operating plan, and then incorporate the technology into the operations. I can't stress enough. Start with operations. If you're looking at technology, understand your operations first, and then go look for the technology. Don't start with the technology. You will become frustrated and disappointed. And it hurts actually the technology providers, because if they don't understand exactly what you're trying to do, they're guessing as well. So with that, thank you very much. I appreciate the time. Thank you very much for staying till the very end. I hope you get to enjoy the rest of Watkins Glen while you're here, and it was great to see everyone in person. So thank you. Thank you.